Welcome back to the On Life podcast. Today, we're talking about a topic that applies to you. You don't have to be in a management position to be a leader, especially a servant leader. And so today, we're going to talk to someone who knows about this topic to kind of dive in more like, what is servant leadership? Why should I care about it? How can I maybe improve in this area? If someone out there knows about it and just wants to get better, we'll maybe talk about that too. So, Robin, who is our guest today?
So today we have Dr. Stacie Rhodes with us. She is the Director of Training and Development in HR. So welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So if you'll just start off, just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this role. And
Absolutely. So I've been with the university for several years now. Originally started out as a teaching assistant working on my doctorate in the School of Business. That's what pulled me up to the university. And then was able to partner with the university building the Center for Financial Literacy and started talking about personal finances and biblical financial wisdom. And that's certainly a passion of mine and a side tangent. But then from there, I was asked to step into the Associate Dean of the School of Business role and served there for about 18 months until my shoulder was tapped to come build a training and development team for the university, which has never existed prior to 12 months ago.
Okay.
So that's where I've landed. And the fun thing is that our first initiatives has been around leadership. And I believe that the previous roles was preparation that God was doing in my heart to light a fire around leadership and specifically biblical leadership. And so that's been our focus for our team. We've rolled out some new initiatives at the university we're really excited about. And specifically, servant leadership is one of those things we get to talk about.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe to start out, like, what is servant leadership for someone who's never even heard this term? And maybe like, how does it tie into what we believe as Christians and biblical truth?
Absolutely. So there's a lot out there about servant leadership if you start going down the path of really exploring it. So I love that question. I would almost do a hot take in saying that it can often be described as a destination. I would challenge it's more of a posture of a heart posture, because when we're teaching leadership development, we actually use a leadership spectrum where you've got transactional leadership that's just telling people what to do, and you've got transformational leadership, which is that inspiration, doing, showing, mentoring. And so if those are the two extremes of the spectrum, you start asking the question of what does servant leadership look like then? And what we would say is that Jesus had a posture, a heart of being a servant. He said, I came not to be served, but to serve. And you see that in a lot of his actions throughout the Bible and his engagement with different individuals in Scripture. And so we would say it's a posture of the heart. And it has this idea that leadership is not to gain power, but to give purpose. And that's purpose to the individual you're serving, but it's also giving purpose to what you're called to do in your mission. And so in synopsis, it's that idea of being the person to serve others and elevate others rather than elevating yourself.
That's something that is great if you are, especially under someone who's leading you from that posture. It just makes work so much better, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what would you say are some of the key traits of a person who wants to be that servant leader?
Absolutely. So I'll actually take John 4, Jesus's engagement with the Samaritan woman at the well. And so just to give some context, Jesus is pretty early on in his ministry. He's got the 12 disciples. They've been traveling a good bit and they needed to go get some food. And so he sends them off to go get food. And he ends up at this well, middle of the day. And this woman comes out to the well, which is very unique because women typically would go get water, draw water from the well early in the morning. And this is an individual lady who's a Samaritan who is not supposed to engage with the Jews. And typically Jewish men would have not at all engaged with her. And yet Jesus asked her a question, would you give me something to drink? And so one of the first traits with servant leadership is that you're building connection, that you're not giving a command, but you're asking a question, and there was always a reason he had for that, right? So she at first is so shocked by him engaging with her that she asked him questions, but rather than answering her questions, he keeps asking questions. And if you actually look at the trend of Jesus throughout the Bible, he only answered a handful of questions directly throughout his tenure. And he asked about 3 times more questions than he was asked himself. And so he was very intentional about leading an engagement. So he initiated conversation. We see that with leadership, is that leaders engage. Then he seeks connection by asking questions. And then he challenged her initial assumptions. She starts talking about, well, you want water? Why are you talking to me? And he's like, okay, you're asking the wrong question. What you need to be asking for, if you knew who I was, you would be asking for living water. And so he challenges her perspective, which is very superficial and temporal, to an eternal perspective. And when you have a servant leader who you're looking to give purpose to the people around you, you're not just dealing with the external things you can see, you start challenging the heart posture. And that may practically look like somebody comes in, they're disheveled, they're late for work, they're irritated, rather than saying, what are you doing? Clean yourself up. Get yourself together. You need to be acting this way. It's maybe pulling aside and saying, you seem off. What's going on? There seems like there's something else. And so while you may have had that inclination and brush by it, you're so focused on that person that you're more intentional about that person and the purpose that you take a moment to dig a little deeper. So we see that with him. And then she says, hey, I don't have a husband. He said, you're right. You have 5 husbands. And only Jesus would have known her story. But what I love about that moment is that he didn't shy away from truth. So servant leadership is not a doormat, is not this kumbaya moment where we're just loving people and just caring about them. And that's all we do. It's truth and love. It's saying, you're right, but this is wrong. Like, I hear what you're saying, but this is the truth. And I still care about you because, again, he built connection from the beginning. And so he's able to deliver that truth and love. And then she becomes the first missionary in the Bible. So this is a woman he shouldn't have been talking to, from a group he shouldn't have been talking to, becoming the first missionary to people to then say, come meet this Messiah. And he gave her purpose. She found her purpose and her calling just through this little connection. And so that hopefully kind of gives an idea of some of the traits that are involved with servant leadership.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you maybe share like a personal experience where you had the power, or you saw the power of a servant leader in action?
I think there's been so many different servant leaders, and I've been able to look at and model. I think one of the earliest stages would have been a basketball coach that I had, who was the key to me getting to play collegiate basketball. And, you know, sometimes coaches, you don't necessarily label them as leaders, but that's what they're doing, is they're guiding you along the path. And there were little things that I don't think until I was older I really realized what he was doing as far as like modeling. He was always showing up early because he never wanted to be late. He was protecting my time and wanted to make sure that he was always there for me. When I was playing basketball, I would be focused on a skill, but he would stop the game and he would call me out on like what God had for me and what life lesson there was. And just showing up at the gym for practices, just to be a part of my life, and just to be able to gain access and connection to be able to speak into my life. And so I saw that there. I saw that in the workplace. I've had several leaders that would just take their time out from their day. If I just showed up at their door to have a conversation, they're turning away from their computer, they're eliminating distractions, and again, asking the question beyond the initial question of saying, I feel like something else is going on. Why is the reaction this way? What can I do to serve you? And always asking that, what can I do to serve you? But then there's also that anticipation of some leaders that I've seen where once they got to know the cadence of who I was, then they're anticipating what might best serve me, or a position or opportunity that would come along that might actually serve my professional development, even if it meant I would be shifting away from their team. And so that's been a beautiful example. And I will also give a shout out to Dr. Costin. If you've engaged with him at all, you will see him in the most random of places, you know, and the approachability, the accessibility, just how he's very present. I think there's a lot of things that go unseen with him. While he's a very visible person, you would never, he doesn't crave a platform, and you can see that in his action as well. And so that's also a recent example that I've enjoyed just watching from a distance of what that looks like.
Yeah, I watched him interacting with some students once, and he was so intentional with them. Like he focused on them the whole time and didn't break the conversation until he felt they were done. I was so impressed.
It's amazing.
Yes.
You'll also see him be very intentional with questions and engagement, and he'll carry the conversation, which I think is very kind for people that may not know what to say with somebody with his position. And I believe that's a kindness to ask and make the focus of the people, not expect the people to have questions of him and he be the subject of conversation. Again, that kind of goes back to what we've seen Jesus model in scripture, is just make people the focus. And that has been beautiful to witness as well, to your point.
Yeah. So, okay, somebody's hearing about this and they're like, that sounds great. What does that look like for me practically? Like, how can I do that in my day-to-day interactions? Maybe it's at home, it's at work, it's, you know, where they volunteer. Like, how can they take this and put this into practice without feeling forced? Because you can always tell when someone's trying to fake something and then they shift out of it. But how can they genuinely, like, start?
Absolutely. I think one of the first things is, when you walk into a room, be the first to engage. Leaders initiate, and they start with engagement. And I think it's very easy to be someone who gets in, you want to get the lay of the land. Maybe you want to post up on the wall, kind of see what people are doing, almost wait. We typically wait to be engaged with. But everyone is seeking connectivity. And we tell our teams all the time, if people are breathing, they need encouragement. And so first thing is, when you show up, engage, start the conversation, seek someone out, seek a new connection out. When you walk into a room, hello, good morning, you know? So first, engage. I would say the second is start observing. If you can think of your own thinking when you're with people and they're asking you a question, are you thinking about your response before they finish? Are you listening to the entire question, taking a moment to pause, and then maybe even asking follow-up questions before you give an answer? Again, with servant leadership, we're looking to serve. And most oftentimes, it's not until the third or fourth question being asked of someone till you get to the purpose or the root of what they're saying. We don't do great jobs asking questions. And so a lot of times, as leaders, we need to have someone refine their question multiple times until we get to the root of what they're actually asking. So that only happens if we as leaders are saying, what I'm hearing you say is this, or could you clarify that more? Or what do you mean by that phrase, I need X, right? So asking more questions, digging down, calming, eliminating distractions. If somebody's coming up to you and they're asking for your insight, if you can give them full attention and eliminate the computer or whatever. And I think it's very easy to get frustrated by distractions, and it's not always a great time for people to ask questions. It's very normal. But what if you were to say, can I get back to you in about 5 minutes? I would love to just finish this thought really quick, and then you'll have my undivided attention, if you really can't deviate from that task. And so initiating, asking better questions, and then really just challenging maybe that personal connection. I think sometimes things can stay superficial professionally. And part of that is just, you may not vibe with people, and that's okay. You don't have to be best friends with all your coworkers. But imagine if you started to learn more of their story and understand a little bit more about where they're coming from. The Lord may give you an opportunity to see them through his lens and maybe understand why they are the way they are. Maybe there's something in their background or something in their personal life that is making them difficult to get along with or something. And so it probably should have been the first, is just that prayer around, how can I serve people? I mean, if you can start with that and asking, Lord, give me the lens through which you view these people, break my heart for them, it'll be amazing how he starts posturing your heart. It's hard to hate somebody when you pray for them. heard a pastor say that years ago. And if I struggle with somebody, anytime, they become the top of my prayer list, and that can dramatically change our relationship. So,
yeah, that kind of ties. I mean, it definitely ties into our next question. Just kind of going deeper with that, like how do we cultivate that mindset of service, like in our basic daily interactions, even when we're dealing in maybe hard circumstances or difficult people. Like I know you mentioned like prayer and stuff. I think that's all great. Yeah. But is there anything else?
Yeah, I think it's taking a step back and looking at the routines of people, as well as just taking yourself out of focus. For example, I have a team that they love to engage first thing in the morning. I do not like to engage first thing in the morning. I want to get to my computer. I want to get my mindset. I want to just get a sense of what's going on. Have I gotten some emails recently? Like, am I going to be surprised by anything that day? That's more of my personality. At the same time, I know that their love tank is full when they feel seen by their leader. And so that only happens, like I have to put myself aside on that and make sure I go around, say hello, quick hello, and also communicate with them. I'm not going to be the most engaging in the first 30 minutes. Love you guys. Appreciate y'all are here. But I just want to say hello. And so noticing some of the trends and what's your people you're serving need. And that can be something like that. It could also be just making sure you set aside a one-on-one meeting that's maybe not about work. And maybe that happens every month, every quarter, or something to let them know that, or start building that connection. And that can be just one step. If you don't know their significant other's birthday or even their name or anything about them, you're only connecting at a certain level. And that's really hard to do if, again, you don't love that person necessarily, but the first part of serving someone is getting to know them. And then once you get to know them and you see what they consider as service, what they receive as love, if we can use that without it being touchy-feely, what they receive as affirmation, then you won't be able to serve them well. So get to know them and then start even taking notes. Hey, this person likes their coffee this way. I have an app, a notes thing that has my team and their coffee orders. So if I'm at Starbucks and I happen to be going back to the office, I can just quickly get their coffee and bring it back. Even just that goes a long way with them, you know?
Yeah. All right. So you've given some very practical steps here. The majority of our audience are online students.
Yes.
And so they want to learn more. They want to dig in. Do you have any books? Do you have any resources? Anything that you would recommend? Like they're like, this has been fantastic. You've piqued my interest. I want to learn more. Absolutely.
So there's a lot of books out there about leadership. And I would say one specifically for servant leadership. I don't necessarily have one that I love for servant leadership. I actually believe there's a little gap in the market when it comes to that topic. And I would even say maybe to explore shepherd leadership. I love that idea. 1 Peter 5, 1-4 is a really cool passage I would encourage everyone to dig into when it talks about caring for flock. And it's not just siloed to pastors, but it's also a leader who is taking care of people. But John Maxwell, he has so many different books on leadership, the High Road to Leadership. There's Level 5 Leadership. Patrick Lencioni has some incredible books about teamwork and leadership and some crucial conversations. And so I love Patrick Lencioni as well. Jim Collins is often referenced in the material we do for leadership training, which we actually pulled from Dr. Costin's paper. We train everything around biblical leadership at the university. And so Jim Collins is often referenced as well. He has some great things on leadership. So I would say those are some key authors. When it comes to, this is a little bit outside of the realm, but when we talk about service and we talk about next level thinking, I like to kind of do cross-functional reading. So taking ideas from something else and applying it. And Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara has been something in the past couple of years a lot of leaders have shared. And it's his story of building a restaurant to be number one in New York, but it's snippets about going above and beyond and how to serve people. And it puts you in the mindset of your client or in the mindset of who you're serving and what that next level of service looks like. And so I think a lot of those those ideas can trigger your thoughts. If you're serving and you're leading people, what's the next level you can do to make their experience that much better? And so it's kind of a odd little recommendation, but one that my team has gone through and really enjoyed.
That's great.
What would you say to the online student who's maybe out there saying, this sounds like something I should definitely do, but I'm not really in charge of anybody, or I'm not a leader in my office. I am a, stay-at-home mom, or I go to church and serve in some ministries there. Like maybe I could use this there. What do you say to someone like that who just wants to know maybe how to use it in a non-business kind of context?
Absolutely. So a couple quotes. I will also say Craig Rochelle has a lot on leadership. He has a leadership podcast I listen to. It drops one Thursday every month, and he'll do some additional things. So that and Global Leadership Summit is one that's phenomenal. But one thing he says is the hardest person you'll lead is yourself. And John Maxwell will say that leadership is influence. So if you have influence, if you're a mom, you have a lot of influence. If you are existing, you have influence, because there are people that you're doing life with. The only person that could say, I absolutely don't have influence, is somebody who's living in complete isolation. And to them, I say, please get out and be in community. We're called to community. And if you're in community, you have influence. So no one gets off the hook of being a leader, and especially if the hardest person you lead is yourself. And so I believe that there's a lot of servant leadership in every realm, because again, it's a posture of the heart. And the idea is that you're not gaining a platform, you're giving a purpose. And whoever you're around, you could be the person to ask them the question, a heart question that challenges their purpose or encourages their ministry and their calling. And that's not in the realm of professional, that's not in the realm of business, that is in the realm of life. And so I would say you're not off the hook. You who has an excuse, get rid of them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we have one question we ask all of our guests. And now you've actually been on the show before.
Yes.
Right? So you probably know this, so you have to come up with a new answer then.
Oh boy. I don't even remember what the question was or my answer the first time.
So what words of encouragement do you have for our online students who are listening to the podcast today?
Keep going. I think when you're doing a work, when you're called to a ministry, and a lot of our online students, they're doing difficult things, that it is really easy and tempting to stop, to forget your why, to forget what you're doing. But one thing we're sharing with our champion leadership participants is Nehemiah. He went to go build a wall, and he was called from being a cupbearer to the king to going and building a wall for Jerusalem, which was something that was essential. And he had so many different internal and external threats to it. And one thing he kept saying is, I'm doing a good work. I cannot come down. And when I was in graduate school working on my doctorate, I had so many people vying for attention or trying to distract. And I think the enemy was trying to gain a foothold. And my dad said, Stacie, you're doing a good work. You cannot come down. You've got to keep going back to your why and your purpose. And what was fascinating is Nehemiah was so convinced of his purpose and his mission, married with God's divine anointing, that they finished the wall in 52 days. And this was a huge wall. And so online students, you are called to a specific calling and a specific mission, and there's always going to be something to distract, but you're doing a good work. Do not come down. Keep going.
Awesome. That is a great word of encouragement. Thank you again for being here.
Of course.
Dr. Stacie Rhodes, everybody. Now, if you out there have any tips or anything that you've worked on that you think is also helpful for this conversation, we want to hear from you. So email us at onlinestudentlife@Liberty.edu. If you have any servant leadership tips or stories or just anything in general that goes along with this topic, we would love to kind of keep this conversation going with you, the listener. So feel free to send us an email. And some of you might actually get a little gift from us as well. So we'll have to see about that. But so this has been another episode of the On Life Podcast.
Living in abundance wherever God puts you.